Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. My name is Nick. I'm the founder of Unstoppable, and yeah, this is what we are here to talk about today. I've been in crypto for quite a while. I've been through some of the ups, some of the downs. I've made some money. I've lost a lot of money. Yeah, but the space always fascinated me. The tech always fascinated me, just because of its potential and also of the underlying core values and principles. And that is something that always attracted me and that kept me in the space throughout the hard times. And yeah, I've always been interested, especially in DeFi, especially in the community-owned protocols, and especially in anything that is kind of pushing the boundaries, but also trying to combine the old world, the real world, the TradFi world with this new technology and this new space and community. And yeah, to find a way to make that usable for the normal people, for everyday people in everyday life, because I do believe it is a better solution than we have currently in a lot of ways. So that has always been really interesting to me. And yeah, things kind of came together now when we founded Unstoppable last year. And yeah, this is now the first project and the only project that I'm leading, or that together with the team, of course. And yeah, we have some interesting, well, what we believe interesting goals, and are trying to address some issues that haven't been solved properly in the space yet. And that will hopefully add a lot of value, not just to the people who already are in the space, but that will also make the space much more accessible to the people around us. And yeah, these are kind of the driving factors behind why we started Unstoppable. And yeah, now we are excited to be here and start properly building.
Great, amazing. I like your enthusiasm. So I think this is gonna be really good conversation. At first, maybe can you tell us what is this project all about, and how does it work? What's your vision for that project?
Sure. On a high level, the mission is pretty simple, although there's a lot to unpack once you start to look a bit deeper into it. And as the overall mission that we set ourselves with Unstoppable is that we are on a mission to replace the centralized exchanges right now. And the reason for that is because we believe this space and the underlying values it has, like permissionlessness, decentralization, self-custody, these are the important things that a lot of us are here for. I know some people are not too interested in that philosophical side of things, but even if you're more interested in the monetary side of things, it's still better to own your own assets and have your own keys and not have them at a centralized entity, and not having to trust somebody else that they will do right by you and by your property. So yeah, that's basically what we are here for. And we think that right now, even if you're a decentralization maxi and then you really like the space and you kind of don't want to interact with the centralized entities that we still have around, it's almost impossible. Like even just the simple aspect of getting into crypto, whether it is for you or for new people that want to enter the space, there isn't really an option to properly get into crypto without going through the centralized exchanges. And then there's other aspects where just the current decentralized options just don't really measure up to the centralized options, whether it is in terms of UX, for example, where it's just really so much simpler to set up a Coinbase account for somebody new who's coming into the space than it is to set up their own MetaMask, figure out how to safely store their private keys or their seed phrase, then figure out how to even get money into it, then figure out how to connect it to different dApps and stuff like that. It's so much simpler to just open a Coinbase account for the new people. That it's understandable why these centralized exchanges currently play such a large role in the space. And we believe that this shouldn't be the case, and that it is possible for a decentralized alternative to provide at least the same level of usability and of convenience to users but underlying it will have these much better options of self-custody, of decentralization, of permissionlessness. And yeah, that's basically what we are here for. We want to build a decentralized, community-owned alternative for centralized exchanges.
Okay, okay. So now that we know, and I think listeners on the YouTube will know what this project is all about. Now I will start with the random questions because I have some of mine, and there is also some other question from the community that they sent me before this conversation. So is it this is obvious that when I'm preparing, I go to the platform, I'm trying it, I'm trying to use to see what features are available. I know that you are in beta stage, so that is not the full mainnet, and you won't have everything. But one of the things that concern me, you said many things about decentralization to be different than the DEX and all that stuff. But when I see that I need to deposit funds to your platform to make a trade, it's for me it's not that great, because still if I want to do trade, I need to send you money to your platform. You are in the custody of this fund, so how you different than DEX? Why you don't want to do it in the way that GNS or GMX do it, and just let people transfer money straight from the wallet for collateral? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, just for the listeners, you are referencing the beta of our margin trading exchange that is currently live on the Arbitrum testnet. And the way it currently flows is that you do two steps. The first one is you deposit some assets into the smart contract. So that's a very important point, by the way. You're not depositing the asset to us, like into our wallets, like in a centralized exchange, but into the smart contract. The smart contract is going to be open source. It's going to be audited. So you can absolutely make sure that the assets, even though you put them into a smart contract, are still yours, and that your keys are the only keys that can move these assets, either take them back out or execute trades with them. So that's the first difference between a centralized entity like Binance, for example, and our solution that is just a smart contract. But we are not taking custody of your funds at all. It is going to be a smart contract that you can choose to deposit your funds in. Now, the second question is, why do we do it this way? And the answer to that is two parts. So first of all, we will offer both options, the one where you first deposit and then execute a trade as a second step, and the option where you do that in one transaction. The reason why we have it set up right now as two steps, first deposit, then execute a trade, is one, because it is closer to the UX that people are used from centralized exchanges. And our goal is to provide a familiar alternative to that. But even more importantly, beyond that, is that we want to offer some advanced features in a next step. For example, that you can execute trades from your phone, from a different private key than the one who owns the assets. So the idea is that you can use your desktop setup with your hardware wallet, and then you can deposit some funds into a trading account. And then you can register a secondary key that is allowed to do certain things with these assets that you deposited into your trading account, but it doesn't have full custody over it. So the idea, the vision we have in this context is basically you deposit some funds that you want to use for trading, and then you can register a second private key that is stored on your mobile phone in a mobile app. And that second key will be allowed to execute trades, but for example, it won't be allowed to withdraw the funds and take them out and run away with them or something. So that way, we will be able to offer some really convenient features for trading. Again, we are trying to not just match, but even outperform some of the usability and functionality that centralized exchanges have. And one of the things that we want to do, but we want to do it in a secure way, is that you can trade from your phone. And the way we will do this is that there's basically this master account, which is your regular account, and there you can deposit some funds into it, and then you can create delegate accounts that are allowed to, for example, execute trades. And that's the reasoning why we set it up in this first step in this flow where you deposit first and then execute trades second in a second step. This is basically the preparation for the part where we will then use delegate accounts like the mobile phone that can execute the trades. And in that context, we would need it to be happening in 2 steps, because one is controlled by your main private key, the other one is controlled by the one that is just stored on your mobile device. And yeah, in preparation of that, we defined the flows initially as this 2-step process.
Honestly, I'm surprised. That sounds really reasonable, and I think that is interesting feature to have. Yeah, really interesting. Is it unique that your project is doing that, or have you seen that solution somewhere in other project on the market?
I know that some other projects are working on that. I think Gains, for example, has what they call a one-click trading feature or something. The way they do it, though, is in my or in our personal opinion, not quite as safe as it should be. The way the private keys are stored that have access to these funds. And yeah, we definitely want to put the security of our users' assets first. So we are choosing a different setup where any secondary keys, like the ones that might be stored on your phone or on a browser and are not super secure, they won't have the same access to your funds. So we really are going to limit them. They will have a limited rights to do certain things with your funds, like just open trades or maybe even just close trades, things like that, so that you can always be managing your assets and your trades even when you're on the road, just easily from your phone. And you don't have to worry about your hardware wallet or getting everything set up in case there is a big market movement and you just want to execute something really quick.
Okay, all right. Gotcha. So now I'm gonna ask you about some more features on your platform and the features that you will have in the future. When I was going through your light paper, I saw that you will also have swaps on spot, and you will use LP from different exchanges. So it sounds like you're gonna be DEX aggregator. So is it gonna work like basic DEX aggregator? Is gonna be something like 1 inch, or how do you see it will work?
Yes, so both for the margin trading as well as for the spot trading, we are using the existing DeFi liquidity, because we think we don't want to compete with existing DeFi liquidity and fragment it even further and compete with other spot exchanges for LP volume or depth, and try and attract these LPs to come over to us or something like that. We think there is already really good products out there in that space. The most prominent would be Uniswap, for example, and there's really no need for us to compete with them if we can just integrate and build on top of that existing DeFi liquidity. Now, with the aggregating part, there is not just Uniswap, of course. There is, for example, GMX that offers spot swaps. There's Camelot on Arbitrum that offers spot swaps, and others. And we do want to offer our traders the best rate available. Although, especially lately, I'm having a bit of a hard time finding the right balance here. So the reason for it is any aggregator has a centralized element to it. So whether it is 1 inch or even Llama Swap, who is the meta aggregator basically, or any of the aggregators, they have an off-chain server running. And that will basically try and find the best route for your trade by simulating the trades on Uniswap, on Camelot, on GMX. And then it will return, listen, this is the best route. Either go with the full swap through this route, or split your swap into a few smaller swaps and execute this half on this exchange and this half on this exchange. But all of that is built or is done by an off-chain centralized server. And we can do the same, but as I said before, we are kind of decentralization maxis, and we want to make sure that the software we build, especially the on-chain parts, that they really are unstoppable. not just a name for us for our project. We really will want to build them in a way where they just continue to work, even if we are not involved, even if all servers are shut down on our side or something like that. So basically, the way we will probably end up doing it eventually is that there's going to be a fallback route that is just going to default to probably Uniswap, since Uniswap has the most pairs and the deepest liquidity at the moment. And then there's going to be a second layer where we can use that meta aggregator aspect, where we can use a centralized element that will figure out how to get you an even better rate than you could get just only by Uniswap. But we will always want to have that fallback, so that if that centralized element, that server is offline right now, you can still use it completely. And that's very important to us, both from a redundancy perspective, like in case there just is an issue with any of the cloud providers or something like that, that the server is just offline, but also from a regulatory point and all of that, we really want the unstoppable DEX to not be attackable and not have anybody be able to shut it down. And this is one of the elements where we really want to make sure that we are not risking a centralized point of failure, and where we are not allowing anybody or anything that could really shut the entire thing down. We will only do that if we have like a fallback in place that is completely on chain, and that will allow our users to always use that unstoppable DEX, whether there is a server running in the background or not.
All right. I hope that you will deliver this feature, because that sounds really interesting. And going forward, you said that you will use mostly existing LPs like from Uniswap, but there is also in your light paper some things that it will be able to do LPs or single staking LPs. Correct me if I'm wrong after I will finish my question. And there won't be impermanent loss. So can you tell us what type of LP is it gonna be and how you can avoid impermanent loss?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The difference here is between we use the existing DeFi liquidity from other projects for the spot swaps. Within our side of things, we offer our traders leverage. And to offer leveraged spot trades, you need to be able to borrow some funds from someone, so you can increase the leverage of your own collateral. So let's say you have 100 USDC deposited and you want to open a trade with 10x leverage, then you need to borrow another 900 USDC from somewhere. And then we can go to Uniswap and swap those 1,000 USDC for ETH. So for that swap of 1,000 USDC to ETH, we use the Uniswap LPs, the existing DeFi liquidity. But to offer you as a trader even the option to leverage up 10x and to borrow these 900 USDCs, we need liquidity providers on our side. And since this is kind of like not the spot swap between a pair, but it is more like a borrowing lending market, that means that the liquidity providers on our end can provide liquidity single-sided, and they are also never exposed to the impermanent loss, since that trade is offset on the Uniswap liquidity. So if you want to provide liquidity on our platform, it will be liquidity that is used then by traders to increase their position size, to assume leverage. And you basically provide traders the possibility to borrow some funds from you, like USDC. In return, they will pay you a borrow rate and interest on your USDC while that trade is open. And then when they close the trade, we swap it back on Uniswap and then pay back the LPs whatever they borrowed out to the trader.
Okay, all right, gotcha. So going forward, so you will have also borrowing on your platform. So this is gonna be quite a variety of different type of usage. And why you decided to also implement this to the DEX?
Well, This type of borrowing that I was talking about now, it will basically happen under the hood. Like there won't be a big button that says borrow. It will basically be for you as a trader to increase the leverage of your position. The system itself, the smart contract, will basically take out a loan automatically from the liquidity provider for you as a trader, so that then you have more capital that you can execute your trade with. And that allows you as a trader to have the leverage trade. And that part is basically an implied or under the hood and a form of under collateralized borrowing and lending. But it is not quite comparable to the regular borrowing and lending that you would see, for example, on Aave, where it's always over collateralized. And that's not something we plan to include or offer at this current stage. Right now, we are really focused on delivering high quality features in first the spot markets that are going to go live this month. Then the leverage trading that we now talked about, that's going to hopefully go live end of Q2. And then after that, yeah, we have some other stuff that we are working on Unstoppable that we haven't talked about yet. Primarily our bridge aspect that will allow us to get in and out of crypto, and also to offer FX trading and FX markets. And then eventually also the wallet aspect of Unstoppable, which is the third big element that is going to come a bit later, where we then really want to increase the overall market and bring a lot of new people into crypto. But yeah, the borrowing and lending is currently not the borrowing and lending in a form like you would see it on Aave or something. Is not something that we plan on working right now.
All right. So you will have bridge, and this is gonna be like fiat of on and off ramp, and also this FX platform. So where will you get liquidity for FX platform? Is it gonna be like synthetic assets?
Yeah. Synthetic assets? No, we really want to have everything, just as we talk now about on our DEX, on the margin DEX. We offer the leverage spot trades that are always backed one-to-one and that are not synthetic, and our LPs are not taking the other side of the trades to our traders. So if our traders win, our LPs don't lose. It's always going to be a win-win for both of them. So for the FX part, the question was where does the liquidity come from? Yeah, that is a good question. And again, there's like the two sides that we need to find a balance between. On the one hand, we have or are talking already to some of the crypto hedge funds and big players in the space who are interested in that FX and digital stablecoin feature. And yeah, we might partner with them for certain aspects of the liquidity. But at the same time, we really, everything we do, we want to do community driven, and we want to put the community and the crypto traders first and give everybody the same chance to participate in everything we do. Not just the people who already have deep pockets, but we really want to offer yeah, the opportunities in the space to everyone. And so we are also working on yeah, different aspects of how we are gonna wrap the LPing for stablecoins in a vault-like product that we could then also offer to on-chain people, where they can decide that they want to participate and want to provide liquidity for the underlying stablecoins and then make them usable on-chain.
Yes, but I quite don't get it how you will find different currency, because you are saying FX platform, so we need to have euro, like yen, dollar, everything. So you will create those stable coins to trade it on this platform, or how does it work?
Exactly, yes. We will create one-to-one backed stablecoins. So there's going to be an off-chain treasury at the regulated bank where the money is sitting, whether it is euros or US dollars or yen or whatever. And once it's in the treasury sitting there, then we can mint the corresponding amount of the stablecoin on chain. and create it as a digital representation of that $1 or €1 that is sitting in the treasury account. That is going to be the underlying tech, and that allows us to basically create stable coins for any currency that we have a banking partner that can hold the treasury and can hold that asset as a currency in the treasury. And yeah, once we have a treasury on the regulated side, we can then bring it on chain, and then we have a one-to-one backed on-chain version of it, and that will then be the foundation of the FX market that will allow us to offer 24/7 on-chain FX trading.
Okay, that's very ambitious goal, I think, but it's good. It's good. Aim high, for sure. And yes, going forward. Sorry, I had a question in my mind that wasn't on my list. I think I forget it. But okay, let's go to another one. You're saying that in the future, like not now, but in the light paper, that in the future there's gonna be DAO model, and community will be running this project, something like that. So, do you wanna do like full DAO that they have all the power to navigate the project, or this is just, I don't know, DAO for incentives for LPs, something like that?
What we plan to do, so there's different steps to this, I guess. So the answer depends a bit on that. The goal is to have like progressive decentralization. So initially it will be us, the team, who's going to make the decisions, just so we can move fast and quick and adapt as needed to build out the first really solid version of the unstoppable ecosystem that we have in mind and that we described in the light paper, for example. Once that is achieved, then we aim to take ourselves back and transfer the control of the entire unstoppable product and ecosystem over to the community. And this is probably going to happen step by step. In general, we really believe that it should end up as a community-owned project, and it will end up as that. And we will make sure that there is not a centralized point, whether that is me as a founder or us as a team or any external entities that really have a major control of the unstoppable ecosystem. That's really not the goal. We believe in the decentralized aspect of things, and that is definitely the goal and the vision, that once we are at the point where the products are kind of solid and there is not too many changes that need to happen fast, that is the point where we then transfer the ownership and the control of everything over. Now, it will take some time to get there, and also we see a lot of the existing DAOs and different forms of governance that are happening on chain to actually have quite a few issues that might not be the best for the project. So getting a really solid version, a functioning version of a decentralized governance that is led by the community up and running, that will be a challenge in itself. But that is really something that we see coming a bit later and that we will address a bit later. Initially, now our main focus is to get the products out that we talked about in the light paper and in our documentations and in our interactions and AMAs. So the things that the community is waiting for now, we will build that out as fast as possible. And then once it's there, once we have maybe done 1, 2, 3 iterations and everything is working as intended and is growing, and we know we are comfortable and confident that this is a solid product right now, then there's a point where we really want to take ourselves out of the equation and just become part of the community. And then it will be a community-owned project. That has been the goal from the start, and that is definitely something we are going to do.
Okay, but your project is quite ambitious and you have a lot of features, and also you want to cooperate with banks, create many stable coins, have FX platform. How do you see like community will be able to really make smart decision about the project? Because most of the people have no clue how does it work, how this is work, and how it could work. Tell me, because I really don't understand, because this is like something from the space.
No,
So
you're absolutely right, and probably I should have said that upfront. So one of the things that we do is we're going to separate the off-chain entities, the parts that need to interact with TradFi, with the regulated banks, with the stablecoins, and they're going to be a separate entity. They are not going to be part of the on-chain unstoppable DAO that is going to become the DAO. That just doesn't work. I don't think we are there yet, where really a DAO is something that can really functionally interact with a traditional bank. That is just not going to work. And also from the risk perspective. Now, any entity that needs to interact with regulated banks or the TradFi world, right now we see what's happening in the US with the SEC and stuff. There's a lot of regulatory risk on that side of things. And we definitely don't want that to spill over to the on-chain side, to the DEX side, for example. So when I was talking about the unstoppable DAO, what's going to become the DAO, I'm talking about the on-chain entity. So everything around the DEX, everything about the trading platform, the features that are really happening on the smart contract side, on the on-chain side of things, that is going to be completely community owned and decentralized. But the entity that needs to exist to interact with the TradFi world, or that has control over the treasury of the stablecoins, for example, that is not going to be part of that. That's, as you say, I don't think that's going to work at all, and it's definitely not the way to go.
But still, for me, even controlling this on-chain stuff and how DEX works and everything, how you imagine that people who doesn't know how to run a business make decision on your platform and decide which direction platform goes? They don't know nothing about the business.
As I said before, like one of the things we really want to do is make a lot of the unstoppable code immutable. So one of the things we strongly believe in is, for example, not using upgradable contracts. So we really want to build out a feature like the DEX, for example, the margin DEX now, as a product in a version, like let's say we fast forward a year from now, and we might have version 2 or 3, and then we as a team and the community think this is a really solid product at this point, and it's just working. And then there's going to be like some decisions that can be made. For example, maybe how much is trading or LPing incentivized, or how are fees distributed, or something like that. And that will go over to the community decision. Although, as I said before, I think we do see a lot of weaknesses in the current models of on-chain governance that are being implemented. For example, that oftentimes it's like if you own one coin, you have one vote. And if somebody owns 1 million coins, he has 1 million votes. That is, for example, something where we think there should exist a better model. And we will definitely try and find and build something where it's not just the amount of coins you hold, for example, that allow you to swing a vote in your favor, but it really depends on your reputation within the ecosystem, on your history in the ecosystem, how you contributed, and things like that.
So let's say that there is your competitor who is bigger than you, and they think that you are a threat to their work and what they are building. They can buy most of the token and just vote to close platform. Is it possible?
No. First of all, there's not going to be a way to close the platform. We build unstoppable code. Once the smart contract is deployed, it will be there. It will be running. We can deploy the UI on IPFS or something, and then there's nobody who can stop it. There's nobody who can shut it down. It will be there. It can be used. And as I tried to explain before, we are trying to, when we get there, we will implement a model that doesn't allow people to just buy coins and then swing the vote in their favor. But somebody like the early adopters that we have in our community right now, they might get a way higher weighting for however many tokens they own when they vote than somebody who just buys them now, like a year from now, just to change a vote or just to influence a vote. So we really see a lot of issues with the current model of on-chain governance in a lot of cases. And that is exactly as you described. Somebody might just come in and borrow or buy a bunch of tokens and then try and influence a vote. And that is, for example, something that is not acceptable to us. We really want to make sure that the right people have the right influence in the Unstoppable ecosystem, and that it's not just the rich people who can decide which way it will develop.
All right. We can leave the DAO topic, and the question from the audience: can you tell us the date of the order spot DEX release and whether it will be possible to enter ZK era?
The date, well, the first version is actually already on Arbitrum mainnet, but that is an internal one that we are currently using for testing and for setting up the keeper infrastructure, for example. We set the goal is to push out the spot features in April, and yeah, we are sticking to that. We are definitely going to launch the spot limit orders part. And then I'm not entirely sure yet if in the first release we also already include the trailing stop losses and the dollar cost averaging, or if we're going to just roll that out bit by bit, like launch the spot limit and then a week or two later the trailing stop, and then a week or two later the DCA part. I'm not entirely sure about that yet. Will depend a bit on our resources and yeah, how the coming 1-2 weeks are looking like. And then yeah, we will see, but the first features are definitely gonna launch in April.
Okay, so when you will release this spot DEX, is it gonna be order book DEX from the beginning?
Not order book in a traditional sense. Again, we are building on top of existing DeFi liquidity, like Uniswap in this case. We will just allow basically our users, we will give you a great UX that will allow you to place limit orders and say you want to buy a certain amount of ETH. If the price drops to 1800, then you can submit that order on our spot DEX. And then a keeper will keep an eye on the price of ETH USD or USDC, for example. And when it hits 1800, it will swap your USDC for ETH and will allow you to assume the position.
All right. And another question, do you have someone in your team who had experience working for the Texas, for the exchanges, brokers, something like that? If there is also someone who have background in finance, because you need to coordinate the work with all those entities that will provide you custody for the stable coins for the different currencies.
Yeah. So from a centralized exchange, we don't have somebody who worked for those guys before. And I'm not sure if that would be super beneficial. On the TradFi side, we do have someone. We introduced him in our last AMA last week. George, also known as ZRH on our channels. He's an ex-banker who saw the light and came to the good side of crypto. And he has more than 30 years of experience in the TradFi space. He has a lot of connections, both in the US as well as in Switzerland. And yeah, he's leading the effort on the integration with the traditional side of things.
All right. What are your plans for the marketing? When are you gonna do some ads? Do you think that you will create some video on YouTube to present how the platform works? What is your strategy?
Yeah, the reason why Elsa isn't here right now is because she's in some meetings with the new marketing partners. We do have a lot planned on that front, and given how well our public sale went and our race, we also have some resources now to scale that up further than we initially anticipated. So we do have quite a few things coming in already now in the next month or two. There's going to be different phases where we are going to be targeting different user groups. Right now, it is still more getting people in the crypto space to know about Unstoppable, to know about what we are trying to do. So this is more the investor type of person. As soon as we have the main products live, so end of Q2, is then where we are going to switch to marketing and are going to be more targeting both the traders, but also the liquidity providers. These are going to be the main target group at that point, because we do need to get adoption of the platform, but that only makes sense once the product is actually there and usable. And then beyond that, there's then going to be a phase where the FX market is going to be a core focus, where we again going to try and switch more to that side of things. Also, the traders who are currently really trading on the centralized exchanges, we're going to try and find a way to address them specifically, because like one of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to just try and capture a little bit of market share from GMX or something like that. The on-chain trading space is still tiny compared to what's happening on centralized exchanges, and especially in comparison to what happens off-chain in the FX markets, for example. So our goal is really, like mid or long term, the goal is really not to just get a market share of the existing crypto trading markets, but we really want to grow the overall market and address a completely new type of user segment that is much larger than the existing on-chain traders. And we really want to get them to come over and bring some of the volume that is currently happening off-chain and bring it on-chain. And then beyond that, we have the normie-friendly wallet that we are trying to build, and that where we want to allow normal people to participate in crypto as well. And that is basically going to be like a super nice to use mobile app. And under the hood, it will still be a real self-custodial wallet. It will drive volume to our DEX, and it will bring the crypto markets. It will bring accessibility to the crypto markets in a way where our families, our non-tech and non-crypto friends really can become a part of this as well and participate in this space as well. And once we are there and once that product is there, then the marketing, of course, is also going to focus again on an entirely different user group and direction, and we're going to try and bring them on.
Okay, so on this wallet, is it going to be possible to trade, to make swaps, and do all the features from your platform through the app? Is it going to be app like from the App Store, or this is going to be app from the desktop, or from like Chrome or Safari?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it again is this conflict that we have between: do we want a centralized point of failure, or do we want to offer a different route that isn't centralized, but that is a bit more complicated and a bit less good from the UX point of view? So if you talk about a mobile app to regular people right now, they will always go to the App Store and search for it there, right? So we probably will need to be there as well if we want to offer it to people like just our friends and family who are not that tech savvy and have not been participating in crypto yet. But that also exposes us to that centralized risk. If that App Store decides to block our app for whatever reason they come up with, then that's an issue. So in that context, it would be much better to have that Chrome-based, what you said, it's called a PWA, Progressive Web App. That it would allow us to be way more decentralized and to offer an alternative that has a lot of benefits actually also for us from a development side of things. But it is a bit more complicated for people to let them know how they actually install that and how they get it onto their phone. So it's going to be a challenge. Maybe we will end up doing both. But this is like one of the challenges that we run into almost on a daily basis these days. Do we want to go with the really convenient way that people are familiar with and that offers the most convenience and best UX, but it sacrifices on some of the decentralization aspect, for example? Or do we want to be on the other side? Do we want to not sacrifice any of the decentralization, but then we would need to accept like a worse UX and a worse flow for users? So yeah, this is one of the challenges that we face at Unstoppable a lot, and we'll always try and make sure that we find the right balance, or offer both options depending on the context. But we will see.
Okay, all right, I getcha. Now the question, I hope you will get it right, because this is a question from the audience and they wrote it in Polish, so I think it's gonna be, if I manage to translate it good. So do you plan to implement grid bot to your DEX that they will generate more volume and fees from the swaps for stakers? And this is more explanation about this question. This is very important question because this gives you advantage and no one has it from the DEXs.
Yeah, so not necessarily just one certain type of bots, but one of the things that we are planning to do is that we really also look for an easy way for offering the DEX interface in an API way, so that people who do a lot of automated trading or who want to develop their own automated trading strategies, that they can also easily interact with our DEX and place orders, cancel orders, execute orders, things like that. And yeah, so this is going to be a focus of the development at a bit later stage. And then we probably will also offer some of the default bots or trading features that are accessible in some areas. And yeah, I'm not sure if Gridbot is going to be the first or something, but that's also then something that either community can build themselves or where we are also always open for some input from the community. But yeah, in general, we do see that a lot of the decentralized options are not at the same level as the centralized options when it comes to supporting automated trading strategies. So this is definitely something we want to explore and where we want to offer a better solution than the ones that are already out there.
Okay, thanks. So how big is your team? How big is your team? How many people works for you?
The core team currently are six people, and we at the moment we have 3 freelance staffs that are helping us out when we have things to outsource to them. One is especially focused on security audit and reuse of the smart contract sites, and then one we have that is supporting us on the backend side, and one that is focused on the UI side of things. The core things, we like all the security relevant things are going to stay with the core team, but the other things where it's not as critical, this is stuff that we're going to outsource to other people. And yeah, we definitely plan to grow the team a bit over the coming weeks and months, but we really also just want to hire really good people because our current team is really good at what they do. Like we don't have anybody who doesn't really have multiple years of experience in their respective space and who are really at the top of their game. And we don't plan to just hire people, so we hired a few more people. Like we want to keep the team small. We want to keep the meetings small and efficient and not end up being one of those projects or companies who end up in 27 meetings a day and getting nothing done. So we want to keep the core team lean, but whenever we do come across someone who is really good at what they do, we definitely want them to become a part of the team.
Okay, and most of them are full-time?
Yes.
Okay. And we know that in the crypto space, it's not just only about the product and fundamentals of it, but you need to have really strong marketing to get to wider audience. And as I can see in your light paper, there is Elsa who leads the way of the marketing, and there is said that that she has a vast experience in growing Web3 project from the scratch. And can you tell us what project she built and what are her success in that?
Well, her success is hopefully visible from the tokens that we just completed and the way how Unstoppable has been performing so far. She has worked before on a project that was initially called Crestcoffin, and later it's something called Fluid. We left those. I also worked at Fluid at the time. This is where I met Elsa. We left those about a year ago when some things there didn't seem quite right. And then we decided that, yeah, we don't want to be working with people anymore who are not quite, who don't quite have the same values and same core principles as we do. And that's basically then when we started Unstoppable from scratch, from zero, end of last year. And yeah, since then, Unstoppable has been, I think, performing really well. Now we are not so interested in the purely hyping and shilling part of things. We really believe that in the long term, it is better to have a solid product, to have solid fundamentals, and then make sure that people understand those and are attracted by those. And we always wanna try and how do you say, under promise and over deliver. And we don't want to be caught on the other side of things, where we are shilling people and telling people things that are never going to happen, or that we know that are never going to happen. Now we definitely have ambitious goals, but at the same time, we really want to deliver what we talk about and what we promise to our communities. And yeah, so overall, we definitely believe that marketing is a very important part of any project. There is no such thing as build it and they will come, because they need to know about it before they can come. So marketing is a very important part. But at the same time, we really are careful of who we partner with and what kind of marketing we do. And yeah, I think the token sale is now a great example of how that works out. Especially for me as a founder, there were quite a few moments where I was a bit worried or concerned if things are going to play out, because we did only have, or we still only have, a small community, I would say. But also, if you look at the community growth, just over the last month, we pretty much doubled on all the social platforms. And yeah, the type of partners that we are working with, whether it is on Twitter or with the Blockmates, for example, or some of the upcoming partners that Elsa is working on right now, we are very selective there with who we work with, because we do want to make sure that the quality comes first, and that we are not going to end up doing a shilling and pump and dump type of scenario. We really are here to add value to the space and to our community. And yeah, this is not something that we are willing to compromise on.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good way to cooperate. We have someone from the audience who want to ask a question, so I'm gonna bring him here. And this is the Wire. The Wire, are you with us?
Hi, Nick. Thanks for coming, first of all. And as I understood correctly, you have been working, or you have worked before, for other crypto project, probably related to DeFi. And my question is, what lesson have you learned during that time with those projects, and what are you trying to avoid in the future with Unstoppable? Because for sure, as you may know, it's cheaper to learn from other mistakes than making it themselves. And the second fix is like few members of our group are huge believers, so we are keeping our finger crossed, and good luck with your project.
Yeah, thank you, first of all. Yeah, we got some exciting stuff coming, and yeah, we are really glad to have you guys on board. And yeah, really happy to have you be part of the community. Yeah, so learning from others' mistakes, that's a great thing, and it's always better to learn from other people's mistakes than make them yourselves. So I guess, well, one, I have worked for other projects, and that's something where you can learn. But the other thing is, I have been in the crypto space myself, and I have been part of the community of other projects as well. So that's also been a way where I saw a lot of things going well, and a lot of things not going so well. So that's also going to be a source of where we are taking our experiences from and trying to adapt. Perfect example would be the type of token sale thing. We saw how Redacted did it last year, and we thought really this is a great way to actually have a fair auction. And so we wanted to do it ourselves there. Now, from the project side of things, like, I think one of the tough learnings that I had is that you need to be very careful with who you are working with, who is on your team, who is making decisions. That would definitely be among the top learnings here, that you really need to be careful that you surround yourself with people who share the same values as you and share the same core beliefs, and also hold themselves to the same standards. And that's something we definitely do and have at Unstoppable right now. And that's also where I said earlier how one of the difficult things is finding other people that fit that bill, that really have the skills, but also have the core values that we have, and then bring them into the project. Outside of that, I think like one of the things we definitely try to do, just because we think it's the right thing to do, and that we see from other projects, is that we are a community first project, and we do really care about offering our community the best things possible. Like there's so many projects, or we had multiple opportunities to sell to VCs beforehand and before we do a public sale. And as a founder, it's a fucking scary thing to turn down a check with 7 figures on it and tell them, no, we're not going to take your money. We believe there should be a community-owned project, and we do want to raise from a community and not from some deep pockets and have them dump on the community later. But yeah, I think the feedback that we've gotten from the people who are now involved with us has been that this was the right decision, and it's great to see that we didn't need to compromise on our beliefs and values, and we still managed to raise a runway that will now allow us to build out the Unstoppable vision and things like that. So we are always open to learning. We definitely are trying to not make the same mistake twice ourselves, but we are also keeping an eye out for what other people are doing, what other projects are doing, what is going well, what is not going well. And that way I hope we can avoid making any of those mistakes. But great question.
Am I allowed to ask another one?
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
So second one, because I watched your Dutch action, and does other project speak to you about launching their product with your ready to go solution, and is the token UND somehow usable with that? So my question is UND token could be used as a launchpad?
So initially we did already talk to one project. We had 2 more reach out that are interested in general. For a moment, we were thinking if it does make sense to just fully build out a launchpad product right now, since we did already put so much work into the mechanics and the contracts and the UI for our own launch. And initially we thought that might be a good idea and a way to go to launch another product that hasn't really been on our map before. But now we are taking a bit of a step back on that front, just because we realized having a launchpad out there is just the first step, and there's a lot of work and also a lot of risk associated with it after that, because either we need to curate the projects who launch on it. So that means we need to provide resources to do our due diligence, to make sure it's solid projects, to make sure it's somebody that we really want on that platform. Or we would offer it in a more permissionless way. That was some of the ways we were thinking about having our UND community involved. That maybe projects need to find support from our community, and only if they have a certain amount of support, then they are allowed to launch on the platform. But the problem with that is sooner or later, a project will go through that's going to turn out bad. Either they will actually rug or steal the funds, or they are just not competent enough to execute it properly. And just the reputational risk that is associated with that would then fall onto Unstoppable. is just too high at the moment. So it would take more resources from our end that would keep us from actually building what we set out to build and what people now invested in our token sell in, and they want us to build it. So we don't want to spread our focus like now from our core products to something else. And the second part is just the reputational risk and being associated with one of the projects that sooner or later would go down in a bad way. And we think that is really not beneficial for Unstoppable at the moment. At a later time, when we have more resources, more time, and maybe figure out a better way of how to exactly do that in a way where it's separated and we are also more established, so that if ever one of the projects doesn't do so well on the launchpad, it wouldn't be directly associated with us so much. Then that might be different. But at the moment, we are probably not going to go for the full launchpad.
Okay, thank you. And that's all for me. And once again, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so do you have more time, Nick? Because I have still a few questions and we are like 1 hour.
I can do like 5 more minutes, or maybe do 3 more questions or something like that.
Okay, so let's do those quick answers. I'm gonna ask you something, quick answer, and we going to another question. All right?
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so you said there is no VC in your project. So how did you get financing for the project?
We didn't. We did self-financing. We completely self-founded. I paid for everything up to the point, and then we did the community sale.
Okay. That's all right. So do you have a plans to implement trading view charts to your platform, and when, if so?
We already use the trading view lightweight charts. They already are on the beta right now, and later there's going to be an advanced version with an even more capable charting library.
Okay, that's good to hear, because degens wanna draw some lines on the screen, don't wanna go to other platform, and they wanna do it straight from your platform. And the other question: how long is your runway?
That depends a bit. So right now we obviously raised slightly more than 2,000 ETH, which is a lot more than we initially thought we would. So now we need to see how we best deploy that. We are trying to grow the team a bit right now. We are also now ramping up the marketing more than we initially thought we would have budget for. So at the moment, we are still in a bit of a ramp up phase. Once it stabilizes a bit, then we will know our burn rate. And then we also will know which expenses are in ETH and which expenses are in USD. And then we will decide if we want to hedge part of the ETH that we raised, or if we want to swap it directly into a stable coin. And then we can also give a better answer to how long exactly the runway is. But right now, it's definitely big enough that we can build the first full version of the Unstoppable ecosystem. And the goal has always been that we get to the point of revenue, where the revenue itself is sustaining the project and the further development. And for that, I think we are really good.
All right, great. Which chain after Arbitrum?
I don't know yet, is the honest answer. There's a lot of stuff on ETH mainnet that, or not on ETH mainnet, that could be interesting. But of course, transaction cost is a real factor there as well. Then right now, there's a lot of talk about CK. But I think 90% of it is in the hopes of another airdrop. So we're going to keep an eye on it. But also, it's going to be interesting to see what is left after a few weeks after the airdrop happened. In general, EVM chains, all of them are easily possible. And all non-EVM chains require a bit of work and adaptation from our side. So honest answer is I don't know yet. Okay,
that seems fair. I see that vesting schedule for the team partnership and everything, there is like at least 12 months from now will happen. Why you don't have like real schedule for that?
Why we don't have what? Sorry,
clear schedule for vesting tokens for team advisors and partnership.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Well, the main reason is because I assume that a lot of the team will never vest their UND token because the UND token will also be able to be staked in the ecosystem and will receive cash flow. So at that point, there's no need to vest it unless you want to sell it in the Uniswap pool. And I specifically think that especially the team, but also a lot of the partnership tokens will never be vested. So it will depend a lot on individual people's decision. We committed to not vest for the first 12 months at the very least, but I, for example, will probably never vest my UND.
Yeah, I hope that that will happen, but you know, there is many projects and they say many things. So just you know, sometimes I'm just suspicious and I just want to get stuff more clear. So I hope you will do it and you will keep your tokens and won't vest it. All right, and maybe like one more question. In the light paper, there's information that 100% of protocol profits will go straight to the community, to the stakers of the platform. Don't you think that it would be nice to have like some of it to go to develop platform to make changes faster and to have like a capital for the changes?
Oh, absolutely. That's why there is an allocation that we call the sustainability fund. And that is the funds, the UND allocation that can be staked in the system when we do need funds for development and stuff. So the idea is that the sustainability fund can be staked in the unstoppable ecosystem for cash flow to produce like a sustainable long-term revenue. Because the money we raise now in the public sale, it won't last forever, right? And once, like maybe if we talk like 5 or 10 years from now, we want to continue development, or probably other people at this point, since it's going to be community owned, want to continue development. That's really why we thought about the long-term sustainability and why we included that in the tokenomics itself. So there's going to be the sustainability fund that is going to receive part of the cash flows for staking, and then it will be going towards the further development of the platform.
Okay, so now the last one question. Why do you think people should use your platform instead of G-Trade or GMX who are in the market longer? How are you going to be better than them?
That's
in trading, in trading, but in trading, yeah. Mm-hmm.
In trading. Well, okay, so I'm just going to focus on one aspect. There's a lot more of that, or maybe I say two. The one is going to be the UX. We really want to provide traders with a better UX. But the second one is going to be security and sustainability. And we've seen just last week with Vela, where there was an issue with their model, and it ended up they ended up just closing every trader's position, and the traders only got their collateral back. So you might have max leverage long the Pico bottom of ETH, and you were maybe $1 million in profit, and they just closed your position and gave you back your 1,000 ETH, your 1,000 USD that you had in as collateral. And that is something that, for example, can never happen with the model we run, where we have the leverage spot trading, but all trades are really backed one-to-one. So our liquidity providers don't take on the counter side of the traders. So on that side of things, our model can't fail. Not like the GLP model or the Vela model or something where the internal liquidity providers are taking the risk of traders winning. And then if traders ever win in a big portion, the entire thing collapses. And that, for example, is not possible with the leverage spot trading that we offer. And so asset security and sustainability is going to be one of the core focuses of what we are offering and what traders hopefully know and appreciate.
All right. So that's it. That's everything from our side. If there's, I have more questions, but I think I will go to Discord and just ask that in the general chat, and you or someone from the team can answer me later. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your time. That was really nice and good conversation. I like a lot of answers that you gave us, and I think that this project has a lot of market to gain to get to a lot of people and traders, because the idea that you wanna do with this project are really interesting. So thank you, and really good luck with all that you are doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words. Were some really good questions. I enjoyed it. Yeah, maybe we can do a follow-up at some point since you do have more questions. Maybe a bit later when we don't have as much to do on the development side as we do have right now. But yeah, it was really fun, and I hope we could provide some clarity and some insights into some of the details. And yeah, good luck to you guys. Hope to see you in our Discords. And if you have more questions, then you can always drop them there as well.
Sure. So yeah, I think we can meet in the future and talk a little bit more. So thanks and good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.